Greetings, brave soul, and welcome to the 14th century, a time when the Black Plague was the unwanted guest at every gathering, and public health was more folklore than science. You've landed in a historical hotspot, but worry not. I've put together a survival kit filled with pointers, wit, and a sprinkle of medieval mischief to guide you through these treacherous times. Prep yourself for a journey filled with dark humor and brighter survival strategies. In the midst of the Black Plague, isolation becomes more than a mere preference. It morphs into a survival strategy, akin to a knight retreating behind the castle walls. Picture the once bustling medieval streets now eerily quiet, the usual throngs of people replaced by a cautious few, darting furtive glances as they scurry about their business. Welcome to another episode of Plaid Chronicles. Houses once open and welcoming now stand shut, their doors and windows firmly barred against more than just the elements. The town square, the heart of community gossip and gatherings, lies deserted, its usual buzz of activity silenced by the fear of contagion. This new norm of isolation isn't just about physical separation, it's a mental shift, a reevaluation of social necessities. Mundane conversations and everyday interactions, once the tapestry of social life, now carry the weight of potential death sentences. A handshake, a pat on the back, even a shared glance can be fraught with peril. Hygiene in these times takes on an almost sacred importance. The act of washing one's hands becomes a ritual, a small but significant defense against an unseen enemy. Imagine the coarse homemade soap, lye mixed with animal fats, and the ice-cold water drawn from the community well. This act of cleansing is repeated like a prayer, a hope that these simple elements can wash away the deadly germs. People scrub their hands with a fervor, as if they could physically scrub the plague away. The water, murky and cold, becomes a symbol of purification in an impure world. In the event you feel the slightest ailment, embracing quarantine is not just a recommendation, but a necessity. The act of sequestering oneself becomes a grim dance of precaution. Homes transform into solitary fortresses, their inhabitants like monks in self-imposed exile. The quarantined individual lives in a bubble, their world reduced to the confines of their room. Meals are left at doors. The exchange of words occurs through barriers. This separation, while painful in its loneliness, is a sacrifice, a personal battle waged in the greater war against the plague. Herbal remedies become the go-to solution for many, a blend of hope and desperation in each concoction. Apothecaries, with their shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and mysterious powders, become the alchemists of survival. People flock to them, seeking potions and elixirs that promise protection or cure. Recipes for these remedies circulate like precious secrets, passed from one desperate soul to another. A popular concoction might include sage for its supposed ability to ward off evil, lavender for its calming scent, and garlic, believed to purify the blood. Each ingredient is chosen with care, their properties more a matter of faith than science. Protective clothing becomes a vital shield in this battle. Cloaks, thick and heavy, are donned not just for warmth, but as a barrier against the invisible threat. Hoods are pulled low, gloves are worn at all times, and every inch of skin is covered. The very act of dressing becomes a careful, deliberate process, each layer a piece of armor. These garments are not just fabric, they are the difference between health and infection, life and death. And then there are the fleas, tiny agents of chaos in an already tumultuous time. These minuscule creatures become objects of fear and loathing, their presence a constant threat. Rats, the unwitting carriers of these pests, are regarded with a mix of horror and hatred. The sight of a rat scurrying in the shadows is enough to cause panic, its every movement tracked with wary eyes. Efforts to eradicate these vermin intensify, with traps and poisons becoming commonplace. The battle against fleas and rats turns into a war of attrition, fought in the streets and homes of every town and city. This fight is not just against the creatures themselves, but against the very fear they instill, a fear that gnaws at the edges of sanity in these dark times. In times where the air in the city becomes thick with the stench of disease, the countryside emerges, as a beacon of respite. The rural areas, with their sprawling fields and sparse population, offer a stark contrast to the crowded, disease-ridden urban centers. The countryside is not just an escape, it's a strategic relocation for survival. The air is fresher, free from the oppressive odors of urban decay and unchecked sewage that characterize city life. In the rural areas, the risk of rubbing elbows with infected individuals diminishes significantly, not just due to lower population density, but also due to the natural separation afforded by fields and farms. In an era marked by a constant dance with death, the disposal of bodies becomes a grim yet necessary ritual. The streets sometimes become lined with the deceased, and the task of removing these bodies is as crucial as it is morbid. It's not just about the physical act of removal, it's about affording the dead a semblance of dignity in their final journey, even as the living fight to stave off joining them. The burial practices, often hurried and overwhelmed by the sheer number of the dead, are a stark reminder of the fragility of life in these times. Fumigation, a practice steeped more in hope than in scientific grounding, becomes a common sight. The burning of aromatic herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, fills the air with a pungent but not unpleasant smell. This practice is as much about cleansing the air as it is about clinging to any semblance of control in a world turned upside down. The smoke from these herbs weaves through the streets, creating a surreal scene as if the town itself is trying to purge the sickness from its very essence. In these dark times, the turn towards spirituality and prayer becomes more pronounced. Churches, monasteries, and places of worship, though not immune to the plague, become sanctuaries for the soul. The clergy, garbed in their religious vestments, offer prayers and solace even as they too fall victim to the plague. Religion and superstition intertwine as people seek divine intervention to ward off the disease, their faith a crucial anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The use of vinegar and aromatics as air purifiers is another testament to the desperation and innovation of the time. The belief that these substances can cleanse the air is widespread, and the sharp smell of vinegar becomes a common scent in homes. People douse cloths in vinegar, hanging them over windows and doorways, in the hope that these soaked fabrics will act as shields against the plague. Lastly, the relationship with animals undergoes a drastic change. Pets, once considered companions, now become potential threats. The fear that animals could carry fleas, which in turn carry the plague, turns man's best friend into a possible enemy. Livestock, essential for survival, are treated with a new level of caution. As you embark on your journey to the era of the Black Plague, brace yourself for a world unlike any you've known, especially when it comes to the daily bread or the lack thereof. You see, back in those days, surviving the plague was only half the battle. The other half, a relentless quest for food, a saga as dramatic as any medieval tale, only with more vegetables and less chivalry. In this shadowy period, the plague played no favorites. Noble or peasant, everyone was on its hit list. However, when it came to filling their bellies, the nobility and the commoners were worlds apart. The rich had their pantries stocked with grains and meats, while the common folk often found themselves playing a real-life version of the Hunger Games. If you find yourself among the commoners, prepare for a culinary adventure, and I use the term culinary very loosely here. With markets as desolate as ghost towns and prices soaring like eagles, getting your hands on food could be as challenging as knitting a sweater while wearing boxing gloves. Those bustling markets, once a rainbow of fresh produce, would now be more barren than a desert. But despair not, for the land itself might come to your rescue. If you're lucky enough to have a patch of dirt, get ready to put those green thumbs to work. Gardening in these times isn't just a hobby, it's a full-fledged survival tactic. Think less Martha Stewart and more Bear Grylls. You'll be growing beans, onions, cabbages, the works. Each little sprout pushing through the soil will be your small victory against the grim reaper of hunger. No land to till, no problem. Foraging becomes the new supermarket sweep. The forests and fields turn into your personal pantry. If you're brave enough, that is. You could be picking berries one moment and running from an irate landowner the next. And remember, this is an era without Google, so mistaking a poisonous berry for a harmless one could lead to a rather permanent kind of food poisoning. As for hunting, that's a big no-no for commoners, legally speaking. But when your stomach's growling louder than a bear, laws tend to take a back seat. So you might find yourself sneaking into the Lord's woods, eyeing a rabbit like it's the last piece of chocolate on earth. Just be warned, getting caught could land you in more trouble than stealing a dragon's treasure. And let's not forget the urban foragers. With no space to grow their own food, some city dwellers got creative, turning their cramped quarters into mini farms. Chickens clucking next to your bed and pigs oinking in the living room. It's like having a petting zoo in your house, only smellier. As you embark on this time-traveling escapade, it's crucial to keep in mind that navigating the laws of this era is as important as avoiding the plague itself, given the laws were as rigid as a knight's armor. Firstly, you'll find that the plague has birthed a plethora of new laws, each more peculiar than the last. For instance, there's the law against merrymaking. Yes, you heard that right. Festivals, fairs, and all forms of jovial gatherings are strictly forbidden. The penalty for engaging in such frivolities, a stern scolding from the local constable, or worse, a night in the stocks, where your only companions will be jeering onlookers and perhaps a rat or two. If you're considering supplementing your diet with some freshly hunted game, think twice. Poaching in the Lord's forest is an offense that could land you in a world of medieval trouble. The punishment for snaring a rabbit without permission could range from a hefty fine to a few lashings. Not exactly the kind of souvenir you want from your time travels, I'd wager. Should you find yourself feeling a bit under the weather, don't even think about flouting the quarantine laws. These are taken very seriously, and breaking them could mean being branded a public health menace. The law enforcers of the time, not known for their leniency, might lock you in a plague house, an experience that makes modern-day isolation seem like a holiday. Now let's talk about hygiene. There's an unspoken rule that clean hands are a sign of a clean conscience. Although no specific laws mandate hand washing, it's a practice you'll want to adopt. Not just for your health, but to avoid the stink eye from locals who equate dirt with disease. In terms of attire, laws dictate modesty and functionality. Wearing extravagant clothing might attract the wrong kind of attention, like being mistaken for a noble, a risky mix-up during a time when nobles are as popular as a rat at a wedding. Stick to humble garments. They're less likely to get you accused of being a plague profiteer. Lastly, remember that animals are off limits as pets. The last thing you want is to be caught harboring potential flea carriers. The medieval animal controls methods are, let's just say, less than humane. As your journey unfolds in the heart of the Black Plague, remember, this era is more than a chapter in a history book. It's a test of wits and wills. You're about to navigate a world where survival hinges on more than just avoiding illness. It's a daily dance with danger, a quest for the simplest of necessities, food. Brace yourself for a time where markets are ghost towns, and foraging is the new grocery shopping. But fear not, for with a dash of cunning and a sprinkle of medieval ingenuity, you'll find your way. Keep your spirits high, your hands clean, and your pantry filled, or at least try your best. Good luck, time traveler. May your journey be as enlightening as it is safe. If this narrative resonated with you, do support us. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video on Plaid Chronicles.